Okay, hey, hi, hello, welcome back, Alexander and Codex. I'm gonna read a little bit, and then after this I might record something else. I'm a little on the fence about what though, but we'll see, we'll get there. Uh, my stay-at-home order just got pushed back until the first week of May, so I got time. Warfare on favorable ground. As we've already said, guerrilla fighting will not always take place in country most favorable to the employment of its tactics. But when it does, that is, when the guerrilla band is located in zones difficult to reach, either because of dense forests, steep mountains, impassable deserts, or marshes, the general tactics, based on fundamental postulates of guerrilla warfare, must always be the same. An important point to consider is the moment for making contact with the enemy. If the zone is so thick, so difficult, that an organized army can never reach it, the guerrilla band should advance to the regions where the army can arrive, and where there is a possibility of combat. As soon as the survival of the guerrilla band has been assured, it should fight. It must constantly go out from its refuge to fight. Its mobility does not have to be as great as in the cases where ground is unfavorable. It must adjust itself to the capabilities of its enemy. But it's not necessary to be able to move as quickly as in places where the enemy can concentrate a large number of men in a few minutes. Neither is the nocturnal character of this warfare so important. It will be possible, in many cases, to carry out daytime operations, especially mobilizations by day, though subjected to enemy observation by land and air. It's also possible to persist in a military action for a much longer time, above all, in the mountains. It's possible to undertake battles of long duration with very few men, and very probable that the arrival of enemy reinforcements at the fight can be prevented. The close watch over the points of access is, however, an axiom never to be forgotten by a guerrilla fighter. Their aggressiveness, on account of the difficulties that the enemy faces in bringing up reinforcements, can be greater. They can approach the enemy more closely, fight more directly, more frontally, and for a longer time, though these rules may be qualified by various circumstances, such, for example, as the amount of ammunition. Fighting on favorable ground, and particularly in the mountains, presents many advantages, but also the inconvenience that it's difficult to capture in a single operation a considerable quantity of arms and ammunition owing to the precautions that the enemy takes in these regions. The guerrilla soldier must never forget the fact that it's the enemy that must serve as source for their supply of ammunition and arms. But much more rapidly than in an unfavorable ground, the guerrilla band will here be able to dig in. That is, to form a base capable of engaging in war positions, where small industries may be installed as needed, as well as hospitals, centers for education, training, storage facilities, organs of propaganda, etc., adequately protected from aviation or long-range artillery. The guerrilla band in these conditions can number many more personnel. There'll be non-combatants, and perhaps even a system of training in the use of arms that eventually are to fall into the power of the guerrilla army. The number of men that a guerrilla band can have is a matter of extreme flexible calculation adapted to the territory, to the means available of acquiring supplies, to the mass flights of oppressed people from other zones, to the arms available, to the necessities of organization, but in any case, it's much more practicable to establish a base and expand it with the support of new combatant elements. The radius of action of a guerrilla band of this type can be as wide as conditions or operations of other bands in adjacent territory permit. The range will be limited by the time it takes to arrive at a zone of security from a zone of operation. Assuming that marches must be made at night, it will not be possible to operate more than 5 or 6 hours away from a point of maximum security. Small guerrilla bands that work constantly at weakening a territory can go further away from the zone of security. Now he's loading in a lot here, right? And I'm not even through it, but this is all very practical, intended to be taken at face value and used kind of information. Doesn't take a genius to know that fighting in the mountains favors the defensive position, right? Even to meme at you, I have the high ground, etc. Talking about, I find it interesting that he imagines the range of operations between the zone of operation and the zone of control, or the zone of security, as he calls it, your forward operating base or dug-in location or whatever, is 6 hours either way. It makes sense, you know, you do have to sleep and eat, and if you go 6 hours out, 6 hours back, that's a day, right? That's quite interesting. I hadn't thought about that limitation. Well, and it does seem a bit counterproductive to have that kind of rule of thumb, if you will. If you have one locale that you're operating from, and you're hitting things here, 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 etc., and all those are, 6 hours away from a central point, it does betray the location of your encampment pretty easily. So to me, it seems like you would want to vary the distance of where you're operating and where you are engaging, and not just consistently have it within a certain radius. I feel like scattering it more would better obfuscate where you are. But, I'm sure this is more of a outer radius. Yeah, this is an outer radius, but still, with enough data points, given enough attacks, and really it only needs to be like 3 for a trend to be established clearly, your location would be pretty easy to suss out, or at least narrow down. The arms preferable for this type of warfare are long-range weapons, requiring small expenditure of bullets, supported by a group of automatic or semi-automatic arms. Of the rifles and guns that exist in the markets of the United States, one of the best is the M1 rifle, called the Guerrilla. Yeah, it certainly is. However, this should only be used by people with some experience, since it has the disadvantage of spending too much ammunition. Medium-heavy arms, such as tripod machine guns, can be used on favorable ground, after affording a greater margin of security for the weapon and its personnel, but they ought always to be a means of repelling an attack, not for an attack. And that was their original intention. Machine guns were obviously originally intended as primarily defensive. It wasn't until later that they got mounted on, at first, wagons, which was, mixed efficiency. Well, I guess it really depends on what you classify as a machine gun, right? Even oh god, repeating crossbows were a thing. Even crossbows that could fire clips, or a magazine of bolts was a thing, and those, I suppose, were probably that section of medieval warfare, because it's primarily Chinese warfare, is not well known to me. So I don't know if those were originally used in defensive positions or not. But for the most part, historically speaking, and particularly at this time, machine guns and fully automatic weaponry were primarily defensive arms. Though now they've been so miniaturized and lightened that they're often used in offensive roles as well. But for a guerrilla, again, ammunition is your one of your main limiting factors. That makes sense. An ideal operation or composition for a guerrilla band of 25 would be 10 to 15 single-shot rifles and about 10 automatic arms between Garands and hand machine guns, including light and easily portable automatic arms such as the Browning or more modern Belgian FAL and M14 automatic rifles. Among the hand machine guns, the best are those 9mm, which permit larger transport of ammunition. The simpler its construction, the better, because this increases the ease of switching out parts. All this must be adjusted to the armament the enemy uses, since the ammunition that they employ is what we are going to use when their arms fall into our hands. Practically impossible for heavy arms to be used. Aircraft cannot see anything and cease to operate. Tanks and cannons cannot do much owing to the difficulty of advancing in these zones. Very important consideration is supply. In general, the zones of difficult access for this very reason, present special problems. Since there are few peasants, and therefore animal and food supplies are scarce, it's necessary to maintain stable lines of communication in order to be able to always count on a minimum of food stockpiled in the event of any disagreeable development. That's such a soft way to put it. Disagreeable development. In this kind of zone of operations, the possibilities of sabotage on a large scale are generally not present. With inaccessibility goes to lack of constructions, telephone lines, aqueducts, etc., that can be damaged for direct action. For supply purposes, it's important to have animals, among which the mule is the best in rough country. Adequate pasturage permitting good nutrition is essential. A mule can pass through extremely hilly country, impossible for other animals. In most difficult situations, it's necessary to resort to transport by men. Each individual can carry 25 kilograms for many hours daily and for many days. The lines of communication with exterior should include a series of intermediate points manned by people of complete reliability, where products can be stored, where contacts can go to hide themselves at critical times. Internal lines of communication can also be created. Their extension will be determined by the stage of development reached by the guerrilla band. In some zones of operation, recent Cuban War, telephone lines of many kilometers of length were established, roads were built, a messenger service maintained sufficient to cover all the zones in a minimum of time. There are also other possible means of communication, not used in the Cuban War, but perfectly applicable, such as smoke signals, signals with sunshine reflected by mirrors, carrier pigeons. The vital necessities of guerrillas are to maintain their arms in good condition, to capture ammunition, and, above everything else, to have adequate shoes. The first manufacturing efforts should therefore be directed towards these objectives. Shoe factories can initially be cobbler installations that replace half-soled shoes on old shoes, expanding afterwards into a series of organized factories with good average daily production of shoes. The manufacture of powder is fairly simple and can be accomplished by having a small laboratory and bringing in necessary materials from the outside. Necessary? Necessary. Materials from the outside. Mined areas constitute a grave danger for the enemy. Large areas can be mined for simultaneous explosion, destroying up to hundreds of men. That's this section 4. So again, repeating a lot of the same things we've seen, right? A lot of the same points that Che has made. That you fight defensively, you hit and run, you go out, you come back. He does mention for the first time the importance of shoes, and a lot of the points he's bringing up, a lot of the things he's mentioning, like the importance of good shoes, or maintaining arms, or later establishing infrastructure of communication, or the other means of communication that he described, like smoke signals, sunshine mirrors, carrier pigeons. Those could have been pulled straight out of the U.S. Army handbook, particularly at this time, and they are. Do I still have a copy of that? I did. I may still have a copy of that, but that's common survival guide type stuff, and yeah, it would make sense to use those as methods of communicating. However, if you're using an established medium like that, it's kind of, well, you're not the only one who's thought of it, right? The danger of relying on older means of communications or established means of communications is, in all likelihood, there are technical experts supporting the status quo who are better at it, more knowledgeable of it than you are. So information security, infosec, is kind of hard there. But the talking about shoes, and he goes on about shoes for a better part of a paragraph, is something very alienated from I think from the modern conceptualization of war. When we talk about warfare, that's something we often take for granted. Now, if you look at representations of the Vietnam War, things like that, Korean War in media, oftentimes they make a point to talk about the importance of changing your socks, always having on dry socks. And you use your feet every day. It seems like such a silly thing, but good shoes and good socks are as important or more important than having a gun. Yeah. Oh, I'll put in the cut there. This only took 15 minutes. See, not that bad when I just read through it and don't talk that much. But that was all fairly self-explanatory. So yeah, I'm gonna put in the cut here. Sip on this tea, and then I'm gonna jump into chapter 5. I'm not gonna commit to knocking this thing out today, but I might. I might. Yeah, I'm so much more relaxed than I have been previously. It's been so nice being at home, not doing a damn thing, and just not feeling like I need to go out or should go out because I definitely shouldn't. And yeah. Go stir crazy though. Till tomorrow. Toodaloo. Take care. I'll see you then. Bye bye.